Have you ever noticed that some questions seem too normal? Simple, almost innocent. But they leave a strange feeling afterwards, like when someone looks at you and asks, "What's the worst thing anyone's ever done to you?" It seems curious. It even feels like a connection. But it's not. What if I told you that this question wasn't asked to understand you? It was made to map you, to find out exactly where you break. Now answer me honestly. Have you ever told someone something personal and then felt like it was used against you? As if suddenly that person knew exactly where to press, exactly where to hit you. So stay with me until the end. Because what you'll understand here today could completely change the way you view seemingly normal conversations. And most importantly, it can protect you from people who aren't trying to connect with you. They're trying to read you, and maybe control you. Because manipulators don't start by manipulating. They start by asking. And the most dangerous? You respond willingly. You respond thinking that finally someone cares. But there, at that moment, something silent begins to happen. That strange question is not random. It is calculated. It was designed to penetrate your defenses without you noticing. And the most disturbing is that the more natural the conversation seems, the deeper she may be going. You don't feel the risk. You feel comfort. And that should worry you, because normal people ask questions to get to know you. But manipulators ask questions to predict you, to anticipate your reactions, to find out what hurts you, what holds you back, what makes you give in. And all this in just a few minutes of conversation. Now for a second. How many times have you responded to something personal without thinking too much? How many times have you opened parts of yourself because it felt safe? Why did it feel light? Because it felt right. This is exactly where a lot of people get lost. And maybe you too. Because no one taught you to realize that some questions are not curiosity. They are strategy. And they don't come with a warning. They come disguised as empathy, of interest, of connection. But there is a silent difference between someone who wants to get to know you and someone who wants to decipher you. And this difference, almost no one notices. Those who are here have already started to notice things that most people ignore. And this is no coincidence. There's something in you that has felt like something wasn't right in certain conversations, even when everything seemed normal, even when the person looked good. But let me tell you something that might bother you. You were not naive. You were human. And that's exactly what makes this type of manipulation so efficient. She doesn't force it. She invites. She doesn't invade. She approaches. And when you realize, you've already said more than you should. You've already revealed more than you wanted. You've already shown exactly where it hurts. And now, the question changes. It's no longer, why did he ask that? The real question is, what did he make of your answer? Because that's where the game really starts. The manipulator rarely enters your life causing fear in the beginning. He enters causing familiarity. This is the first thing that confuses. Because the image that many people still have of manipulation is exaggerated. Someone aggressive, too cold, clearly suspicious. But it's almost never like that. Most of the time he seems attentive, gift, interested, almost comfortable to be around. And that's precisely why the test works. Yes, test. Because certain questions don't serve to create intimacy. They serve to measure emotional terrain. They serve to discover how long it takes you to open up, which themes make your expression change, which experiences still hurt you, and, most importantly, which gaps within you are still unprotected. All of this can be noticed very quickly, in seconds. Your tone of voice changes. His gaze shifts. Your breathing slows or stops. You try to laugh, try to minimize, try to look strong, and without noticing, he starts handing out a map. That's what this video is about. A type of human reading that does not seek truth, search for access. Maybe you've already experienced this without naming it. A conversation that seemed deep right from the start. A strange feeling of accelerated intimacy. The impression that that person understood you too quickly. And for a moment that seems rare. It even looks special. But calm down. Not every quick connection is a real connection. Sometimes it's just efficient observation. And here's a point that almost no one realizes. The manipulator doesn't listen like someone emotionally available listens. He listens like someone who selects useful material. He pays attention to what destabilizes you, what you tolerate, what you excuse, what you fear losing. He doesn't just want to know who you are. He wants to know where you give in. Have you ever met someone who seemed to ask the right question, at the right time, with the right tone? Like it tapped into the exact part of you that wanted to be understood? This see it tends to let anyone's guard down. Because we all have a silent need to be seen without having to explain everything. And when someone seems to see this too soon, the natural tendency is to trust. It's human. Anyone here has probably already felt this contradiction. At the same time that something felt good, something also felt too fast, too deep, too right. And when it seems too right, it's worth taking a closer look. Because the invisible test works like this. First it creates opening, then measure your response, then compare what you say with what you allow, and then adjusts the mask itself based on that. If you show need, he offers presence. If you reveal guilt, he offers absolution. If you show fear of abandonment, it offers constancy. But none of this is delivered as genuine care. It is delivered as an input tool. And the more accurate the reading is, the less you realize that you are being studied. This is the disturbing point. You think you are being welcomed, when in fact it is being analyzed. There is a very specific moment when manipulation stops being a hypothesis and starts to become access. That moment is your honest answer. Not the thought answer, not the social response, not the one you would give in an environment where you are still on alert. I'm talking about the answer that escapes you when you feel like you no longer need to protect yourself. That's where the trap lies. Because honesty in itself is not a mistake. The problem is her fate. The problem is when something true leaves you and falls into the hands of someone who doesn't feel the human weight of it. Someone who does not receive your pain as trust, but as strategic information. And that changes everything. When you talk about a rejection that still hurts, a betrayal that left a mark, a fear that you try to hide, you believe you are just explaining yourself. But for a manipulator, this type of response works like a password. Suddenly, he knows what makes you weak, what makes you doubt yourself, what makes you more susceptible to asking for emotional crumbs without realizing it. And the cruelest part is that this almost always happens in mild weather. No threat, no pressure, sometimes even with laughter. You open up because the conversation feels safe, because the person looks mature, because the way she speaks conveys acceptance. And then you say something real, something of yours, something that shouldn't be circulated without care. Ready. From then on, it's no longer just any conversation. It is an open file. Have you ever told someone what your biggest emotional wound is, and then realized that that person started touching exactly that point? Not in an obvious way, in a subtle way, with small absences, with ambiguities, with calculated sentences, with comparisons, with silences, as if he knew exactly how much was enough to disorganize you. It's because he knew. The truth is uncomfortable. The more sincere you are with the wrong person, the more material you give them to adjust control. Not because sincerity is weakness, but because people without empathy turn truth into an advantage, and almost no one talks about it clearly. Anyone who follows this type of psychological investigation has already realized one important thing. Modern manipulation does not always use force. She uses reading, she uses timing. It uses your legitimate need to be understood. And here another dangerous distortion occurs. You start to think you were weak for speaking out. It wasn't. You were induced to let your guard down in an environment that felt emotionally safe. This is different, and understanding this difference restores lucidity. Because guilt is confusing, lucidity protects. But there is one more disturbing detail. The manipulator doesn't need you to tell him everything. He just needs enough. Just a crack, just a recurring fear, just a pattern. Once this point has been identified, he completes the rest by observing. And then the question arises that almost no one asks in time. When someone seems too accepting of your vulnerability, Are they accepting you? Or cataloging its loopholes? There is a silent mistake that almost everyone makes when trying to imagine a manipulator. Imagine someone exaggerated, too cold, too obvious, almost cartoonish. But the real profile is much more discreet and much more functional. The handler does not need to appear dangerous. It needs to feel predictable enough for you to relax. This is the first detail. He observes before acting. Calculate before positioning yourself. Adjusts behavior based on the environment, the person, the context. There is no fixed version. There is constant adaptation. And this is not simple instinct, it's strategy. Have you ever noticed someone who subtly changes their posture depending on who is in front of them? With you, more sensitive. With others, more firm. In public, balanced. In private, different. It's not a contradiction. It's fine-tuning. And here comes the breakdown that few people are prepared to face. He doesn't want to meet you. He wants to learn how to use you. This change. A change of perspective changes everything. Because when someone wants to get to know you, there is genuine curiosity, exchange, imperfection, even noise. But when someone wants to use you, every interaction has a function. Each question has direction. Your every reaction is recorded. Nothing is wasted. And this creates a very specific illusion. The illusion of compatibility. You feel that the person suits you, who understands your rhythm, that respects your limits, who speaks exactly the way you need to hear it. But this combination did not come naturally. It was built on you. You are the mold. He's the fit. Those who have already started to notice this pattern tend to feel uncomfortable. That is difficult to explain. It's not something explicit. There is no concrete proof. But there is a constant feeling that the person is always one step ahead emotionally, as if anticipating their reactions, as if avoiding mistakes too soon, like he's too good at it. And this is where a lot of people get lost, because emotional efficiency looks like maturity. But it's not always. Sometimes it's just a lack of real involvement. The manipulator doesn't get involved like you might think. It accurately simulates engagement. He is not emotionally disorganized. It doesn't really expose itself. He does not hand over parts that could be used against him. As you slowly open up, he remains strategically controlled. And this creates an asymmetry. You reveal. He collects. You feel. He watches. You react. He adjusts. And slowly, control of the dynamics ceases to be yours. Now, pay attention to this. When someone seems to understand you too quickly, is that connection, or is it accelerated reading? Because there is a huge difference between someone who discovers you over time and someone who discovers you too soon. And those who are here have already started to notice these types of details that most people ignore. This is not paranoia. It is perception being activated, and the more you see this pattern, the harder it becomes to see certain interactions as innocent again. Because once you understand how this profile works, it is impossible not to notice the calculated silence behind apparently common behavior. The most confusing point in all manipulation is almost never aggression. It's the feeling of closeness. Because before controlling, the manipulator usually builds an atmosphere where you feel like you can finally rest. And that disarms more than any pressure. There is no visible urgency. There is no clear threat. There is relief. You feel like you don't need to explain that much. You feel like you've been understood. You feel like for the first time in a long time, someone has noticed parts of you that others have ignored. And that is exactly where the danger lies. Because fake closeness doesn't feel fake when it happens. She looks rare. It looks mature. It even seems healing. The conversation flows. Identification appears quickly. Tastes seem to match. Pains seem to dialogue. And you begin to think that there is an unusual connection there. But real connection takes time. It takes contrast. It raises doubts. It takes small natural frustrations. When everything seems to fit together too soon, without noise, without strangeness, without limits, it's worth observing. This is not always depth. Sometimes it's mirroring. Sometimes the person is giving you back an edited version of yourself just to look familiar. This affects any human being, because we all let our guard down when faced with what feels like home, in the face of what seems like understanding, in the face of what finally seems safe. And maybe you've already experienced exactly that. Maybe you've already met someone who seemed too light at first, too available, too precise. Someone who got the tone, the speech, the moment right. Someone who seemed to know when to listen to you, when to validate you, when to agree, when to appear similar to you. At first it calms down. Then, arrest. This is the detail that almost goes unnoticed. You feel like you can trust. And that's where it starts. Because the trust that comes too quickly has not always been deserved. It was often induced. It was built with right answers, right reactions, dosed vulnerabilities, convenient coincidences. Not to create a true bond, but to make you associate that presence with emotional comfort. And when this association happens, you begin to tolerate things that you would have noticed before. Small excesses, small invasions, small contradictions. You ignore it because you have already been captured by the initial sensation. Anyone here has probably already felt this firsthand, the strange mix of peace and confusion. The feeling that something felt good, but at the same time was too fast-paced to be completely clean. This happens because false proximity is not imposed. She seduces emotionally. And the most disturbing thing is that when you find out, you are already involved. You've already shared parts of yourself. It has already created expectations. He's already gotten used to the presence. But now, the question gets heavier. If that connection felt so true, why did it start to hurt so much afterwards? Maybe because, and it was never a connection. Perhaps it was strategic construction of access. And when access is disguised as affection, many people don't realize it until too late. There is a moment when almost everything has already been decided, and no one notices. It's not when you tell your deepest trauma. It's not when you cry. It's not when you confess something big. It's before. It's in the small moment when you feel like you can let go of your vigilance. This is the real delivery point, because the most efficient manipulation doesn't take anything from you by force. It creates the perfect emotional scenario for you to let your guard down yourself. And when that happens, delivery doesn't feel like delivery. It feels like spontaneity. It looks like affinity. It seems like a choice, but it wasn't as free as you might think. It was induced. Perhaps by a calm tone of voice. Perhaps because of a hearing that seemed rare. Maybe because of that feeling of, finally someone understands me without judging me. And this is precisely where the dynamics change invisibly. You stop observing the person, and you start wanting to be accepted by them. Do you notice the turnaround? Before you were getting to know each other. Now he's trying to maintain the connection. And when someone enters this place within you, it becomes much easier to guide your responses. You start editing what you say so it doesn't sound difficult. Start explaining too much so as not to be misunderstood. He starts to give in on small details because he doesn't want to ruin a bond that hasn't even proven real yet. This is how delivery happens. Not in a grand gesture, but in successive concessions. Have you ever found yourself justifying something that, deep down, you didn't need to justify? Have you ever answered intimate questions too soon just because the mood felt right? Have you ever ignored an initial inconvenience because you didn't want to seem exaggerated? So maybe you know this point better than you think. And this doesn't happen because you are weak. It happens because human beings were made to respond to the feeling of security. But the manipulator understands this as a mechanism. He notices the exact moment you leave observation and enter need. The moment you want to be understood, validated, held close. From then on, he no longer needs to push too hard. Just suggest it. Just step back a little. Just create doubt. And you complete the rest yourself. This is one of the most disturbing aspects of all psychological manipulation. The victim often participates in the process without realizing it, believing that they are just being sincere, mature, open. But openness without criteria, in front of the wrong person, becomes unrestricted access. Those here may be recognizing painful parts of their own history now. And recognizing this is uncomfortable. because it forces you to admit that you were not mastered all at once. It gradually gave way. It was allowed little by little. He indulged in micro moments that seemed harmless, until one day it was too late to ask when exactly everything fell out of place, because it came out slowly, silently, and with your emotional collaboration. The most disturbing thing is not the moment you respond. That's what happens afterwards. Because while you go on with your life, forget details of the conversation, relativize what you said, try to move on. The manipulator does the opposite. He remembers. He organizes. It connects. Days later, you don't even remember what you said, but he remembers. And it is in this silent interval that information begins to take shape. What you shared, your insecurity, your fear, your neediness, your need for approval, doesn't stay still. It becomes a tool. It becomes a behavior adjustment. It becomes a strategy of getting closer or moving away. It depends on what is most useful. And here's one of the hardest moves to spot. He doesn't use his weakness directly. He uses it indirectly, subtle, almost invisible. If you have revealed a fear of abandonment, he may begin to alternate presence and absence with surgical precision. Not enough for you to leave, but enough to keep you trying. If you've demonstrated a need for validation, he may offer recognition, and then withdraw. Offer, and withdraw. Creating a cycle where you start looking for something that he himself conditioned. If you tell him you've already been cheated on, he can insinuate doubts, raise small suspicions, create ambiguous scenarios that activate exactly that old wound. None of this is a coincidence. It's application. You start to feel things that feel like you, but they were activated. You react, explain, try to understand, try to fix, without realizing that you are responding to carefully positioned stimuli. And the more you react, the more he learns. But he adjusts. The more precise it becomes. It's a cycle that feeds on you. Now let me ask you something straight. Have you ever felt like you're always trying to get back something you didn't even know when you lost it? Like the relationship has changed, but you can't put your finger on exactly where. Like you're always one step behind, trying to get back to that beginning that felt so good, that it's not random. It's emotional engineering. Anyone here begins to notice a pattern that many people spend their entire lives without naming. And when you see this, something changes inside you. Because it stops being about what I did wrong and becomes about what was done to me without my realizing it. And it doesn't weaken you, wake you up. But here comes the most uncomfortable part of all. The longer it takes you to notice, the more data it accumulates, the more precise it becomes. It becomes more difficult to leave without carrying confusion, guilt, and doubt. Because it wasn't a single action, it was a sequence, small, repeated, silent, and profoundly effective. So maybe the question is no longer, why did that happen? Maybe the real question is, how many of your reactions were actually yours, and how many were induced without you realizing it? In the end, it's almost never about the question. It's about who was listening. This is the part that changes everything, because many people spend years trying to understand the exact phrase, the exact gesture, the exact moment in which it was captured. But the most dangerous manipulation does not depend on a specific question. It depends on intention. Two people can ask the same question. One wants to understand. The other wants access. From the outside, it sounds the same. Inside, it's another world. The question was never the problem. The problem is the mind that collects its response without care, without guilt, without human weight. And that's why cracking this game doesn't start by learning ready-made phrases. It starts by learning to observe the rhythm, the speed of intimacy, excessive precision, the feeling that someone seems to hit exactly the right spots too soon. Because when you understand this, something very important happens. You stop feeling obligated to explain yourself. This is liberating. You don't owe deep answers to those who haven't yet proven depth. Emotional access should not be given to anyone who has only demonstrated efficient curiosity. There should be no total transparency for those who are still only partially present. This awareness protects more than any decorated technique, Because the true antidote to manipulators is not to become cold. It's becoming lucid. It's realizing that not all listening welcomes. Not every connection brings you closer. Not every question deserves complete truth. Maybe this bothers you. Maybe there's a part of you that still wants to believe that if someone asked calmly, with empathy, with the right look, then it could only be genuine. But the real psychological world doesn't work like that. There are people who study your reactions while you believe you are just having a conversation. And recognizing this shouldn't make you paranoid. It must make you present. Pay more attention to your signs. More faithful to the discomfort that appears before the logical explanation. More respectful of that strange feeling that arises when the conversation seems too intimate, too fast, too perfect. Anyone who has come this far has already understood something that can avoid a lot of pain. Your weakness is not in feeling. Your weakness begins when you give what you feel to someone who hasn't yet shown you what they do with the other person's truth. Keep that sentence. It can save you from relationships that start as a shelter and end as a laboratory. And perhaps the biggest mistake many people make is waiting for an absurd test to back down. But the signs almost always arrive first. No slight discomfort, in the invisible rush, in the question that seems normal, but leaves a strange echo inside you. Listen to that echo. It doesn't always come from fear. Sometimes it comes from perception, and perception saved. If this video opened your eyes, write in the comments which type of question made you feel like there was something wrong in the air. I want to understand to what extent you have also seen this mask up close. And share this content with someone who needs to learn to understand when a person's interest is not affection. It's access. Because in the end, those who manipulate don't want to come into your life. It wants to get into your system. And once you see that, certain questions never sound innocent again.